Computer. Um, Hello. My name is Isaac Blanchette, and our group topic is autonomy. To start off, I want to talk about my article, which is called "The Rules and Limits of Developmental Neuroscience in Determining Adolescents' Autonomy Rights: The Case for Reproductive and Voting Rights." In the article, it goes in and basically starts off with talking about like how the oversimplification of maturity and how the brain develops has been like used throughout the years. This itself is a 2024 article, so it's quite recent, and it goes in like talking about like how the oversimplification, you might see it in like court cases where penalties and sentences are reduced, or in rare cases like dropped because it is a minor that is like it's a minor defendant. So like it's talking about like, oh, hey, this like there's a lot of like oversimplification of the neuroscience that comes with the maturing of the brain. Often like the saying of like, oh, your brain doesn't fully mature, or your prefrontal cortex doesn't fully mature until you're 25, which is a gross simplification of everything, which also ends up downplaying what like the different like mental processes that adolescents can go through. And in the article, it even talks about like a few different ways that like adolescents are able to outperform adults even in certain like mental like exercises and practices, such as like turning fake news and like certain, it's mostly like media literacy type things, but like also like it talked about like how the the neuroscience has to be looked at in order to better like the rights of the adolescent. And as it did that, it started going into and pivoting into the reproductive rights set like portion of it. And basically like with the article, it's the way that it talks lends itself to being a pro-choice article, which is also my personal stance on the subject. And it talked about like how um adolescents really need the ability to like make these reproductive decisions, how they are often able to, because like in the moment, things might be seen like, oh, impulsive, very rapid fire and stuff like that, but like things with like abortion, um like adolescents are shown to be able to make like just as firm decisions and have just as much mental processing as adults when it comes to determining like, do you get an abortion? Do you not get an abortion? And basically like that whole process.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, so sorry to cut you off. Um, my article kind of talked about that same thing about like how like when adolescents make choices, it actually can be like it's actually they make the right choice a lot of the times.
Yeah.
Um, so my article personally was about like it's about parental autonomy granting, self-control, and social initiative among Chinese adolescents. So it more focused on how because Chinese culture is very focused on the Confucianism, and so they're focused on the whole rather than the self. And so the self-control kind of was more focused on like interdependent versus independent. So if you focus on others versus yourself, and like within context with your community. And so this article pointed out that in Chinese culture, the father and the mother have different like um impacts on their adolescent social initiative. So um like the father may will have an indirect on his son or on his adolescence, like basically um interdependent self-control. So their view of themselves inside of society. So he'll have more of an indirect, while a maternal figure will have more of a direct and indirect impact on independent and indirect, or yeah, independent and interdependent. So it's just kind of interesting to see how a mother and a father have different, they both have a very large impact, but it's very different.
Hmm. Yeah,
I
I
also,
definitely think. Oh.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say like I was just gonna say that I found that very interesting that like how like the differences of the parents and how the differences of culture. Like,
Yeah, my article also focused a little bit on parental autonomy, um, and the support that they give to their adolescents. They took a look at social influences that included peer influences and the adolescent's ability to resist it, along with the support they get from their parents. They followed two groups of Dutch students. One group was about 17 years old, the other was about 11 years old. There were four time points that they checked in on these adolescents over a time period of 2 years. They measured their personal autonomy, their support from their parents' autonomy, and then their peer resistance. And they found that each time they self-surveyed these adolescents, every time their general autonomy would go up, they would also have an increase of their parental support autonomy and also their peer resistance. Um, this aligned with a lot of other studies that have been done in the past that also found the same thing, that every time one went higher, so would the other two that followed. So it was a very dynamic process that intertwined with each other. So it wasn't just one thing solely making a general autonomy rise. I think also it's important to note that adolescents want to know why to everything. So helping them understand the background to things will help their autonomy, and not just making decisions for them, and instead guiding them and helping them figure things out for themselves. Also, I don't know if you guys have personal experience with adolescents, but for mine, they don't always want to ask for help. So being sure to ask the right questions is also really important. And I think that comes a lot from parental support that they get, and their just overall support that comes outside of peer groups too, because I think a lot of times their views or beliefs could be different from those of their peers. And so helping them understand that they can have their own decisions, their own personality, is really important. And just helping them, guide them, and helping them understand that, mistakes can be made, but also you can learn from those mistakes. And so I think a lot of that comes from parental support, family support, which is what this article took a look at a lot. Yeah.
okay.
My article also touched, sorry, my article also kind of touched on like parental autonomy, but my article mostly focused on the autonomy that like a mother grants to their daughters and to their daughters specifically. This is taking place with the demographic of like Mexicans. Um, so in the article, I'm so sorry. It defines autonomy granting as like the degree of like how mothers allow their daughters to make decisions, like express their own opinion and act independently, because Mexico is a very collectivist culture, which means that you need to get like in a way like permission from others in order to like think the way you do, dress however you'd like whatever you do, it needs to benefit society. It can't just benefit yourself. And I found it really interesting how the article only took account into like mother support, like in granting the autonomy. And I think that's mostly because mothers are the ones who are taking care of the children, while fathers are out there like getting the money and taking care of the family like financially. Um, I thought it was really interesting how this article focuses on if the adolescent is granted more autonomy, they have their own means of like forming their own identity rather than relying on the culture and like the traditional like values, beliefs, or just like anything like along that line to shape their own identity. And I think it's really important to, sorry, I lost my train of thought, to remember, not remember, I'm so sorry, that that autonomy like becomes more, uh, guys, I'm so sorry. I lost my train of thought.
No, it's okay.
Um,
It's all good.
Okay, I think I found it. I went to say like when autonomy is low, like these adolescents, like the Mexican girls, because this is what they focus on. They rely on their parents to like guide them into forming an identity. And when the autonomy is high, they rely less on the parents and more on their own exploration. This own exploration is like closely tied to identity. So that's the reason why I chose this article, because it's like it's tying autonomy and identity together, which I think is really interesting to see, especially in a demographic that I'm a part of. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, and I definitely agree that like it's something that like you might not always see in every like article, but like the amount that identity and autonomy intertwine is from start to finish, really.
Yes, I agree.
Your guys has talked a lot about like how parents play a role, I guess, in like the autonomy of adolescence, and then mine's kind of like an alternate or I don't know, alternate route for like adolescents if their parents like aren't there for them and if they need to go somewhere else. So mine focused on like clinicians and whether clinicians can enhance adolescents' treatment engagement through the use of autonomy support. And then it had like three main studies. And the first study, it kind of was more about the clinicians and like the training that they've received throughout like their education and everything. And basically they had like a video and it was kind of like it would test them to see like their reaction to the adolescents. And there was two different groups. There was like a group who was more aggressive and like failing out of school, not doing well in their classes and stuff. And then the other group of adolescents was like more depressed and anxiety based adolescents, I guess. And it just kind of found that like with the videos, the teach or not the teachers, the clinicians did do a little bit better just because they knew that they were like under pressure and getting watched. So their performance was a little bit better, but that they still need a lot more like education, I guess, and training. Because when adolescents were like aggressive and I don't know, not complying to them, they kind of met them where they're at. But when you're a clinician, you're taught to kind of calm everyone down, and like that's your job. So it's important not to meet people where they're at. And then the second study, it kind of was the same exact thing, just more like statistics, I guess. And it found the same exact thing that like when a clinician is like meeting their client where they're at, a lot of the time it just gets kind of out of hand and the clinician tries to take control of it and then the adolescent kind of like shies away and then just shuts down completely. And a lot of the time they drop out of like seeing their clinician and they just go down the path that they're already going to go through. And then the third study, they switched it around and then it was like the adolescents were kind of judging and seeing like clinicians' response. And a lot of like the research found that a lot of the adolescents didn't agree with like the clinicians' responses just because it was kind of more aggressive and it wasn't exactly like they weren't seeing eye to eye, which also kind of goes into like that how adolescents are looking for like more of an ally versus like someone who's like an adult and like talking down to them. And then like key takeaways I had is that autonomy support increases adolescent treatment engagement. So like when you're supportive, the adolescent's more inclined to speak about what they're really feeling because they feel support and they feel like you're an ally and that you kind of, or I don't know, supporting them. And then another one is clinicians think that they use autonomy support more than they actually do. They're trained to like use autonomy support, but a lot of the time when they're like actually in the situation, they don't do that and they kind of try to take control of the situation and be like the adult figure, which is what the adolescent is looking to like escape or get rid of. And that was basically what mine was about.
I think it's kind of interesting, Lauren, with yours. Like you said right that like education wise, like it really didn't affect their education, correct?
Yeah, I don't think so. No. Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of the same with mine. They found that like autonomy, like greater autonomy or perceived autonomy from their parents in the Chinese culture, it helped them like it didn't determine their grades, but it rather determined whether or not they could like form to a new school if they moved school. So it was like not grades based, but more social.
Mhm. Yeah,
I
it was.
also want. Oh,
Go
I just want to say like I also found that it was like interesting like how you said like oh they like these clinicians are taught like this autonomy training but like often like they'll kind of fall back into like oh the I'm an adult maybe I should go that route and how like it's rather negative like it doesn't really help any like in the moment if that does happen.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's also I sorry, Ashler Elizabeth. I don't know how to say your name,
Oh, you
sorry.
can call me Lay.
Okay, Lay. I think it is very interesting how like our cultures, like while so your like mine was about Chinese, but yours was about Mexican, correct?
Yes.
So it's just kind of interesting because like mine was talking about how Western culture is so individualistic and like it's just kind of like interesting to see like actually it's not in some ways like some parts of Western culture are very much like kind of similar and focus on the group.
Yeah, I would say like Mexico is definitely like a big collectivist culture just because I think it has to do a lot with the traditions or like the way they act with other people. Like in the United States, everyone is pretty much like in their own circle. And in Mexico, it's not really like that. Like everyone has like a big group that they're a part of. And that's because in Mexico, you need to act in a way that like benefits everyone. And I think that mostly has to do with the fact of with like expectations that's placed upon every person. Like you're supposed to pull your weight for this group of people. So, and I think it's like really interesting to see how like how different it is like from like to see how different Mexico is from China, like how like your article was about. Um, but would you say like China is like collectivist in its own way or
It's not collectivist. They more follow Confucius, where it's just um, you work towards the greater good. So it's not more of like family oriented. It's more work on like work on yourself to make the greater good better in a way, if that
okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I think it's also interesting how different social pressures can contribute to an adolescent's autonomy. So, like here in the United States, I feel like there's a lot of different social pressures that are for women than there are for men. And I think that in other cultures like Mexico, it's very different from the United States. And so it's interesting to see the difference between the two. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think.
I also think that it's very interesting the like how different like cultures like affect that autonomy and how the different like if you like the way that autonomy looks like here in the United States and the way the autonomy looks in like Mexico or China or any other type of culture is going to look radically different while also still having like similar roots, I feel.
I think also media influences are different. I
Yeah.
think media is actually a really big one that goes into an adolescent's autonomy, especially nowadays, because with social media being so big and almost every adolescent being on at least one platform, it's they see so many things that contribute to their autonomy. And I think it's important to make sure that they know that not it one experience isn't going to be the same for all. So I think it's really interesting to bring social media into the conversation as well.
Hmm.
Um, I do think like there are like so for mine there's a lot of limitations that we should maybe talk about. Mine personally like it's a cross-sectional study, so it's just a bunch of data at one point in time. And so it's very hard to tell like how this autonomy like will work in the future for these adolescents and truly what it like makes because this my study is more focused on like basically just how they feel their autonomy is given to them and how it makes them feel. So I think it's kind of like we need to see that future. But
Yeah, I
yeah,
agree. I think limitations, sorry. I think limitations are also important. Mine took place, the data they collected happened during COVID-19. And so I think that was also a really big thing that happened in our society that really impacted adolescents, especially ones younger than like 17. And so it's important to note that, like, schools were not in session, it was all over Zoom. And so not only is support looking different from families or parents, also peer influences, because you can't always determine what peer influences are going to look like when you're not face to face. And so I think it's important to note as well.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
we're like for sure headed like in the right direction. Like I think that like I don't know, just like everyone's culture as a whole is definitely headed in the right direction, especially like the United States, I would say. I covered like Swedish individuals, but like I would say too that they're headed like in the right direction. Like even like parents probably like from what I've heard from you guys. Maybe Mexico is like a little bit more traditional, I would say, but slowly headed in the right direction. And it's nice too that they have like other outlets, I guess, other than their parents. Like clinicians and therapists that they can go to also like express their autonomy.
Yeah. Um, does anyone else have anything left to like any closing comments?
I don't think so. I think I covered it all personally for me, but
Yeah. My article is very long, so I was able to get like what I said, I feel is uh the main ideas of this.
Yeah, I think everyone's kind of like related to each other, like in one way or the other, for
Yeah.
sure.
All right. Um real quick, do we want to end it off by saying our names just in case?
we could just all say our names and then say thank you. Just for
Yeah.
that. I'm Braden.
I'm Isaac.
I'm Jessica.
Oh, I'm Lauren.
I'm Ashley Beth, also known as Lay.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
nice
Thank you.
day.